I didn't expect a necklace. I didn't even expect affection. But I didn't expect that. On our 38th anniversary, while I was waiting across the table in a dress he hadn't complimented, he handed me a card. Just a plain white envelope. I smiled, foolishly maybe, thinking this might be the moment. The gesture, the apology, something. I opened it. One word. Thanks. That was it. No love, no for everything, not even a scribbled happy anniversary, just thanks. And while I sat there blinking at that insult in cursive, he stood up, calm, collected, and walked over to her, my daughter-in-law, Pauline, the woman who never even liked birthdays. He handed her a velvet box, the same wrapping paper I used last Christmas. She opened it with a gasp, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. Inside, a $20,000 diamond necklace. I'd seen the receipt later, but right then, all I saw was the way he clasped it behind her neck, gently, like she was precious, and the way her eyes flicked back at me, smug and gleaming. She turned, smiled like a snake, and said, "That necklace looks better on someone who still wanted." And I didn't say a word, but something inside me cracked so quietly, no one noticed it until it was too late. She said I wasn't wanted. And the worst part, he didn't even flinch. No protest, no defense, not even a glance in my direction. He just let her say it, let her sit there wearing my silence like a trophy around her neck. After dessert, I disappeared into the guest bathroom, locked the door, sat on the cold tile in that dress. I'd spent an hour ironing for a man who barely looked at me. I didn't cry right away. I stared at the mirror, at the version of myself who used to be wanted, who used to be chosen, used to be loved. But the thing about silence, it stacks. Quiet nights, missed birthdays, cold beds, little lies disguised as routine. I had convinced myself for years that this was normal, that this was what aging looked like, that I was still his wife, not just his roommate with a ring. But tonight I saw it for what it was: neglect wrapped in ceremony, disrespect dressed in diamonds. And I wasn't crazy. I was just patient, too patient. A soft knock broke the stillness. "Mom?" My son. His voice low, gentle, like he was scared of what he'd just witnessed. I saw it too. That cracked me open. Not with pain, but with clarity. Because if he saw it, then it was real. It had been happening. This wasn't a bad moment. This was the end of a long betrayal. And maybe, finally, the beginning of something else. He didn't ask if anything was wrong. He already knew. He just sat next to me in that silent kitchen like a man bracing for a car crash he saw coming too late. "Do you still have access to the joint account?" His voice was careful. Like it might cut us both. I opened the laptop. My hands felt wooden. I'd stopped checking the account months ago. It was easier than constantly pretending I was okay with the trickle of missing money and excuses. It loaded. The page blinked. Then it hit me. Jewelry gallery minus $21,437.89. His mouth tightened. Not surprise, just rage without volume. "That's her necklace," he said. "He used your account?" "No," I said softly. "Our account," but I was already clicking again. My private savings, the one under my name only. The one I used to protect, like a second spine. Balance, way too low. I scrolled. Wire transfer, $45,000. Wild Root, Collective LLC. I blinked hard. It sounded like a spa. Or a scam. I looked it up. Homepage. Pastel pinks, blurry plants, vague words like reclaim and energy. No services. No products. Just a support our vision button and 3 studio photos of Pauline posing with incense like she invented breathing. And in tiny gray text at the bottom, proudly funded by a legacy partner. That legacy was me. I felt something curdle in my chest, a new kind of grief, the kind that doesn't sob, it sharpens. She created a fake company, my son muttered, scrolling next to me, to funnel your money. I wasn't done. $17,200. Interior renovation services. Paige Castleton, her maiden name. They didn't even try to hide it. Not only was she stealing from me, she was billing herself for the theft, like this was just another invoice for a job well done. I looked around my kitchen, peeling laminate floors, a fridge from 2006 that still rattles when it kicks on. I'd spent the last 5 years clipping coupons while they played house with my retirement. I never approved any of this, I said. I know. His voice was quiet now. Different. Like something had broken in him too. He opened a folder on his phone and started saving screenshots. We need to print these, all of them. I know someone at the credit union who can help. I nodded, still staring at the numbers. This wasn't about money anymore. This was a campaign. Strategic, calculated. They'd waited until I stopped watching. Until I stopped asking. Until I was numb enough to trust on autopilot. They thought if they moved slow enough, I'd never notice the drip. But now, I was drowning in it. And the worst part? He knew I'd go quiet. He counted on it. My son looked up at me. Mom, I think this goes deeper. I didn't answer. I was still locked on that one line. Legacy partner. They'd replace love with a contract, strip me for parts, repackage my loyalty as funding. And now they were wearing it like a crown. I closed the laptop, sat still for a moment. Then I stood up. Because I'd spent years being passive, being polite, being quiet. But this was war. And if they thought the woman who built an entire life from nothing couldn't tear it all down, they've never seen what I look like when I stop hoping. They're about to. I'd never hired a private investigator before, never even thought I'd be the kind of woman who needed one. But I wasn't about to sit in that kitchen, surrounded by betrayal and old appliances, wondering what else they were hiding. My son made the call. His friend connected us to a man named Eric, a retired detective who now handled domestic patterns. That's what he called it. I called it truth. We met at a small cafe across town, one of those places with wobbly tables and coffee that tastes like burnt hope. I wore sunglasses, like I was someone worth recognizing. My hands trembled on the cup. Eric arrived exactly 2 minutes late. He was calm, quiet, sharp, the kind of man who read more than you said. I slid a photo of my husband across the table. This is him, I said, and this is her. I added Pauline's Instagram printout. Too many filters, too many captions about healing and light. I don't need them followed forever, I said, just long enough to know if what I think is happening actually is. He didn't flinch, didn't raise an eyebrow. 3 days should be enough, he said. He left with the folder and I left with a weight in my chest I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. That was Wednesday. By Saturday morning, the envelope was on my porch. No text, no warning, just an unmarked manila folder tucked between the screen door and the mailbox. I opened it at the kitchen table, same spot I'd sat when I first saw the bank statements. There were photos, dozens, labeled, time-stamped, printed in sequence. Them, my husband and my daughter-in-law, at a small restaurant across town, not with friends, not with colleagues, just the two of them. He was leaning in. She was smiling with her entire face, not the practiced social media kind. The wine glasses weren't full anymore. The waiter wasn't in sight, just them, comfortable, intimate. In one photo, she reached across the table and touched his wrist. In the next, he laughed at something she said, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from him in years. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. Then came the final sequence. Different night, different outfit, same ending. They were walking toward a hotel entrance. No hesitation, no disguise, just him, holding the door for her like a gentleman. Her, glancing over her shoulder, not checking for me, just smiling, like she had won. The last photo hit the hardest. The two of them in the hotel lobby, waiting at the desk, a small suitcase beside her, his hand on the small of her back. I dropped the photos on the table. It was official. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't old and insecure and confused. I was being betrayed by the man I married and the woman who married my son. And the worst part, they weren't even hiding it anymore. My son came by that night. I didn't show him the photos. Not yet. I needed to understand something first. Why her? I asked quietly, pouring tea. I didn't plan to drink. Why do you think he'd give everything to her? He hesitated, eyes low. She knows how to play him, that's all. You, he paused. You didn't play games, Mom. You just loved him. I nodded slowly. Love was never the problem. But love without boundaries? That's how people like me get erased. I stood up, walked to the drawer, and placed the photos inside, not to forget them, but to prepare, because now I had what I needed, proof, not of the affair. No, that wasn't the goal. What I needed next was to find out how far they'd already gone, how many lies they'd buried inside contracts, how many traps were already signed with my name, and if I knew my husband like I used to. I had a feeling the worst wasn't the cheating. The worst was what they'd already done with my trust. The next morning, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went to the closet and pulled out the same purse I used when I signed the loan documents for his business 15 years ago, the one he begged me to co-sign on just until we got off the ground. Back then, I believed his voice more than I trusted my own instincts. Not anymore. I drove to the local office supply store and bought a recorder. Nothing fancy, just something small enough to hide near the hallway where he always took his late-night calls, the kind of device meant for someone trying to catch a stranger. But I wasn't catching a stranger. I was catching my husband. That night, I played the good wife, made dinner, let him complain about traffic, laughed at a story I wasn't listening to. I even cleared the dishes when he was done, not because I wanted to, because I needed him to stay comfortable. And like clockwork, around 9:20, he took his nightly glass of whiskey and made his way into the den. I heard it before I even hit playback. Her voice, soft, flirty, like syrup laced with poison. I know you said she wouldn't fight back, but are you sure she won't notice? Pauline asked. She doesn't even read the paperwork, he chuckled. She signs anything if I sound confident enough. I stood there in the dark hallway, the recorder still rolling, and realized something that made my skin crawl. They didn't just think I was naive, they thought I was dumb. The woman who built a business from scratch. The woman who juggled payroll and grief after her father died in the middle of tax season. The woman who raised a child, buried a parent, and still managed to keep a roof over their heads while he networked at happy hour. They thought that woman would keep nodding along like a fool. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table listening to the full recording. Twice. They talked about moving assets. If we shuffle the deed before end of year, she won't even notice. They joked about how I still believed in love. They were building an empire with my money, my name, and their lies. By morning, I was done pretending. I pulled out the file cabinet from the hallway closet and went digging. I had copies of everything: rental property deeds, tax filings, insurance policies, and in the middle of the stack, something caught my eye, a notarized document. Legalese on cream-colored paper. Transfer of ownership. Partial, one of the rental properties. The duplex we'd bought 6 years ago. Signed by me. Only, I'd never seen it before. I stared at the signature. My name was there. Cursive, familiar, but wrong. Too smooth, too practiced, forged, and notarized by a name I didn't recognize. I felt my throat tighten, but not from fear, from clarity. They weren't just stealing affection or dignity. They were stealing legal control. And I'd just found their first crime on paper. I called my son immediately. He drove over in under 20 minutes. We sat at the dining table with the document between us. "That's not your signature," he said. "I know it isn't. You write your R's different." I nodded. Then I made another call, this time to a lawyer, one who specialized in fraud, the kind of lawyer who doesn't flinch when things get ugly. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about survival. And if I was right, the house we shared, the money I'd saved, and the business I built, they were already coming for it all. And next, they'd try to take the home itself. I needed to clear my head. After the lawyer confirmed the signature was forged, and that yes, the deed change was illegal, I decided to give myself one day. Just one. I hadn't seen my sister in months, and I needed to be around someone who didn't speak in manipulation. She lives 2 towns over, and when I arrived at her place, I hugged her harder than I meant to. She didn't ask what was wrong, just brewed coffee and brought out the old photo albums. For 24 hours, I let myself laugh. I let myself remember who I was before love got twisted into a ledger. The next morning, I drove home early. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No cars in the driveway. No sound of the television humming in the background. Just my porch and a notice taped to the front door. I froze. The paper was typed. Impersonal. Renovation notice. Temporary entry restriction. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a contractor's error, maybe something routine, until I reached for my key. It didn't fit. I jiggled it, tried again, slower, firmer, still nothing. That's when the truth crawled up my spine. I wasn't locked out by mistake. I had been shut out on purpose. I knocked. Nothing. Rang the doorbell. Still nothing. I tried calling my husband. Straight to voicemail. I stood there in the morning, cold with my overnight bag and a sick feeling in my gut, staring at a house I paid for, legally still owned, and realized I couldn't even step inside. My phone buzzed. A message from my son. "Mom, call me when you can. Something's happened." I walked back to my car, hands shaking. Drove to a nearby gas station parking lot. Called him. "Mom." His voice was cautious, like he already knew what I was about to say. "I went by the house this morning. The locks are changed. And your name isn't on the deed anymore." I didn't speak. He went on. "I checked the county records system. It was updated while you were gone. They filed it electronically. It shows Dad as sole owner." I felt my throat go dry. "That's not possible," I whispered. "We already caught one forged signature." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Because right now, I didn't need comfort. I needed clarity. They didn't just take my name off a deed. They had taken my home, my footing, the last illusion that I still had a place in that house. But what they didn't know was that I had already started the process with the fraud attorney. I had already submitted the first forged deed. I had the recording. I had the money transfers. And now? Now I had motive. Because once someone kicks you out of your own home and dares to call it a favor, they've made one thing very clear. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a full-blown heist. And next, I would discover just how deep the damage went. Because when I checked my credit score that night, something was very, very wrong. I didn't go back to my sister's that night. I sat in a cheap roadside motel with a bedspread that smelled like burnt plastic and someone else's perfume. I hadn't cried yet, not when the lock wouldn't turn, not when the county website said I didn't exist on my own deed. But when I opened my laptop and checked my credit score, that's when it hit me. I stared at the number like it was in a foreign language, down 173 points. In 2 months. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe the bank flagged my fraud report and that triggered something. But the more I scrolled, the faster the room started spinning. There were accounts I didn't recognize, a business credit card from a bank I'd never used, a loan for interior upgrades with my name attached, even a line of credit from a wellness financing platform for holistic startup funding. And then I saw it. Borrower, Marianne L. Cosigner, my full name Pauline's middle name. Of course she didn't use her married last name. That would have made the trail too obvious. I clicked through the details. The contact email listed? My husband's. The authorized signer? My husband. He had signed on my behalf. He'd signed as me. I felt like I was sinking into the motel mattress, swallowed whole by the weight of it. This wasn't just identity theft. This wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. They were using my credit to build her empire. Every free aromatherapy workshop she bragged about online, I probably paid for it. Every intentional womanhood retreat she hosted in rented cabins, my signature was on the lease. I just didn't know it. I sat in that room until my coffee went cold and the silence started to hum in my ears. Then I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the credit union branch where my personal savings had been for over 25 years. Marilyn, the woman at the desk, had known me since I used to bring my son in with juice boxes and fruit snacks. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile faded when I told her why I was there. We printed every document. 3 hours later, I had a folder thick with paperwork and a sick ache in my chest. Credit pulled 12 times in the last 60 days, 6 new accounts, 3 of them maxed out. In my name, $69,482.17. That's how much debt they had dragged out of me without ever saying a word. And the worst part? Because the accounts were opened with forged digital consent, the companies wouldn't just close them overnight. I had to prove I didn't sign. I had to prove I didn't ruin myself. And still, part of me kept whispering, how could they do this to me? The woman who raised him. The woman who kept the lights on when his startup flopped. The woman who still had the birthday cards she wrote him when he was 5. How could he let her do this? Or worse, help her? I took the entire folder and drove to my lawyer's office. When he looked through the documents, he didn't look shocked. He looked ready. We'll escalate this, he said. This is no longer a family matter. This is financial abuse, forgery, and credit fraud. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. And then he asked, has anything else come up? Any mail redirected? Any notices you didn't expect? I nodded slowly. There's one thing I haven't told you yet, because hidden deep in the mail pile I'd picked up from my sisters was a glossy postcard from her spa, promoting a grand opening event. And the address was my house. My home. She was opening her business in the very place they kicked me out of. And that was going to be their final mistake. The postcard never left my purse. I carried it like a wound. Glossy, smug, and shiny, just like her. It was addressed to friends and neighbors, but the message was clear. You're not just out. You've been replaced. I didn't tell my lawyer about the event. Not yet. Because this wasn't something I wanted handled behind closed doors. No paperwork. No quiet, polite court date. I needed to look them both in the eye. The grand opening was a backyard barbecue. Family friendly, the flyer said. Free drinks. Guided meditation. Spa tours. That last part made my stomach turn. She was offering tours of my home. Of course, they didn't expect me to show up, but I did. I pulled into the cul-de-sac around 4 p.m., parked a few houses down, watched people laughing in the yard that used to be mine. There were balloons tied to the railing, a chalkboard sign near the driveway, "Welcome to Wild Route," written in cursive with hearts around it. I walked in through the side gate like I still belonged there, because deep down, I did. I passed a group of women sipping kombucha, all of them dressed like they were going to a yoga-themed baby shower. Then I saw him, my husband, talking to 2 men in polo shirts, laughing like this was the beginning of something, not the graveyard of what we built. And there she was, Pauline, in a white linen dress, barefoot, like she was playing the part of some spiritual guru. She held a mimosa in one hand and my life in the other. I waited until she started her little welcome speech, mic in hand, camera phones up, before I stepped forward. I have a question, I said. The entire backyard turned. My voice didn't shake, not even a little. Pauline froze. My husband dropped his glass. I was wondering, I continued, louder now, how you forged my signature on that property transfer. Was it before or after you seduced my husband? Gasps. My heart was thudding, but I didn't let it show. I have the original deed. I have my signature from the bank. I have recordings, emails, wire transfers, and I have a lawyer. Someone tried to laugh awkwardly. Someone else whispered, "Is this real?" Pauline stepped forward, her voice fake sweet and tight. "You're causing a scene." "I am the scene," I snapped. That's when my husband finally moved. "Why are you trying to ruin everything?" he hissed under his breath. "You could have just stayed out of it." Stayed out of what? My own house? My own name? My own life? He reached for my arm. I stepped back. And Pauline, she threw her mimosa in my face. I didn't flinch. The glass didn't even break, just bounced in the grass like it knew better than to escalate things before I was done. The silence afterward was thick, uncomfortable. Someone muttered, "Should we call someone?" "You can," I said calmly, wiping my face with a napkin from the buffet table. "But they'll probably want to talk to them first. About identity theft, credit fraud, forgery." I turned, slow and deliberate, and walked out the same way I came in. I didn't need applause. I had something better. I had proof. And now, thanks to their little stunt, I had witnesses. I texted my lawyer from the car. "All yours now," I wrote. But by the time I made it back to the motel, there were already voicemails waiting, 15 of them, all from the same number, and all from him. The motel room door clicked shut behind me, but my mind was still in the backyard, still standing in the middle of the party where they tried to bury me alive, under white wine smiles and rented spirituality. I dropped my purse on the bed. My shirt was still sticky from her drink. Her rage had citrus in it. That was the last thing I noticed before walking out. My phone buzzed again. I already knew who it was. Call 16. I opened my voicemail app. The first message started with silence, then a shallow breath. "Listen," he said, "please don't do this. You're angry. I get it. But this? Lawyers? That's too far." Click. Next one. "I was trying to protect the family. You always used to say family came first. You've forgotten that." Click. Then another. Louder this time. "You want to destroy everything we built just because you got your feelings hurt?" Feelings hurt. He used those exact words about the woman he robbed, gaslit, and locked out of her own home. I kept listening, one after another. His voice started fraying, getting more desperate. The man who barely looked at me across the dinner table a year ago was now pleading like a man watching the walls close in. "I'll undo it," he said in message 9. "The accounts, the deed, everything. Just don't take this public. Don't embarrass us." Embarrass. That word made me laugh. He'd emptied my savings, forged my name, funneled tens of thousands into her fantasy business, and now I was the one threatening their image. Message 15 was the one that stuck. His voice broke near the end. "I didn't think you'd fight back like this." That was the truth. Right there. Not that he was sorry. Not that he regretted what he'd done. Just that I wasn't rolling over. That I hadn't stayed small, quiet, manageable. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something. He had never been afraid to lie to me. He'd only ever been afraid of me knowing my rights, knowing my worth, knowing the law. I forwarded all 15 voicemails to my lawyer, labeled, time-stamped, categorized. When he picked up, he didn't sound surprised. "Classic panic cycle," he said. "This is where they try to spin it into miscommunication and hope guilt will do the rest." "Too late for that," I said. "I hope so," he replied. "Because we filed." I blinked. "Already?" He sounded almost pleased. "Fraud, identity theft, spousal misconduct, plus the forged deed, and the unauthorized credit usage. And the cherry on top? The audio recording. We're requesting full financial compensation, immediate credit restoration, and motioning for an injunction on any further property transactions." I sat back on the bed, the phone still warm in my hand. Something in me exhaled, not relief exactly, but release. The weight of doubt, the kind that had been sitting on my chest for years, was finally shifting. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being emotional. I was being robbed. And now, they'd have to answer for it. "All we need now is a reason to bring up the trust," he added. "You mentioned something odd about your medical paperwork?" I paused. My stomach turned. "Yes," I said slowly. "There was a name I didn't recognize, a doctor I never met." "Send it to me," he said. "That might be the root of everything." And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just about money. This was about erasing me legally, financially, and maybe even permanently. And that so-called trust fund? It was never meant to protect me. It was their escape plan. The next morning, I drove back to my sister's house, not because I needed comfort. I needed the paperwork I'd stashed in her attic storage bin weeks earlier, when everything still felt salvageable. I climbed up the rickety wooden steps and opened the lid with shaking hands. Inside were old tax returns, birth certificates, and a blue folder I barely remembered packing. At the very bottom was the hospital packet, discharge summaries from my surgery last spring, appendectomy, nothing serious. I'd barely been under for a few hours. He'd driven me home and even brought me soup that night. I remembered thinking, maybe this is what healing looks like, for both of us. Now, that memory tasted like ash. I flipped to the release forms, then to the page marked, Durable Power of Attorney. There it was, a signature I didn't remember giving, and a witness I'd never met. Dr. Emil Hartley, assigned as supervising physician. The name meant nothing to me. I'd seen Dr. Kaplan that day, the family practitioner we'd used for a decade. But this Hartley wasn't on staff at that hospital. I checked online. No local listings, no photo, nothing. Then I pulled out the second document, one I hadn't read before. Legalese, formal font, stamped and dated 2 weeks after my surgery. Marital Trust Establishment Agreement. It began in standard language, but midway through, my name appeared, followed by a clause that made my blood run cold. In the event of incapacitation or diminished cognitive ability, Marianne's decision-making and financial access shall be suspended. Assets will be transferred into protective oversight for the benefit of surviving spouse and chosen family custodians. Surviving spouse, chosen family custodians. In the margin, a list of transferable assets was hand-noted. Our home, the duplex, the retirement accounts. My name was circled, but under control, it was scratched out and replaced with Pauline's. She wasn't just in the trust. She was the trust. I stood in the attic, heart pounding like I was back under anesthesia. Except this time, no one was waking me up. This had been the plan all along. They waited until I was drugged and healing, then filed paperwork behind my back, faked a doctor, faked a diagnosis, and built a legal structure that slowly moved everything I owned out from under me. My body had still been recovering when they started erasing my identity. Quietly, methodically. And it worked, because I trusted him, because I loved him. I called my lawyer immediately. He answered on the first ring. I didn't even say hello. I just read the clause word for word. He was silent for a moment. Then he let out a low breath. That's not just fraud, he said. That's premeditated asset conversion. If we can prove the doctor doesn't exist, we can unravel the whole thing. He doesn't, I replied. I checked. He's not licensed anywhere in this state. Then we're moving fast now, he said. And we'll need one more thing. Someone willing to testify that this was planned. Someone inside the family. That stopped me. Because at this point, almost everyone had chosen a side. And most of them hadn't chosen mine. But there was still one person I hadn't asked. One voice no one expected to matter. And that night, sitting in the guest room with the trust paperwork spread across the bed, my phone buzzed. It was a text. From my grandson. Grandma, can I tell you something? I heard them say you'd be gone by Christmas. That was all he wrote. But it was enough to shatter the last illusion. They hadn't just planned to take everything. They'd planned to outlive me. I drove straight to the courthouse the next morning. Not because I had to. I still had time, but because after reading my grandson's message, I couldn't waste another second pretending this was about misunderstandings or miscommunication. This was war, and they were willing to win it by burying me. My lawyer met me at the steps. He had the trust paperwork in one hand and a look in his eyes like he knew exactly how deep this was going to go. We file today, he said, and when we do, there's no going back. No family dinners, no compromise. I didn't flinch. There hasn't been a family for a long time. He nodded. We walked inside, through the metal detectors, down the cold marble halls. Filing felt almost anticlimactic until I walked out and checked my phone. My daughter had texted. You're embarrassing yourself. He was just trying to protect the assets. You're being paranoid. A minute later, a message from my sister-in-law. This is jealousy, Marianne. You're jealous of youth, of Pauline, of how she makes him feel needed. Needed. That word cut deeper than any legal filing. I was the one who nursed him through pneumonia. I was the one who celebrated every client win like it was a championship. I made him feel needed when no one else even noticed him. But now, they wanted me forgotten, rewritten as bitter, unstable, disposable. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the school and waited in the parking lot. I texted my son, asked if I can speak to him. Just 5 minutes. My grandson came out alone. He climbed into the passenger seat of my car, legs too long now to swing like they used to. He didn't smile. Didn't ask why I was there. He just said, I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. I turned to him slowly. What did you hear, sweetheart? He stared straight ahead. They were in the kitchen, Grandma Pauline and Grandpa. She said, we'll just make sure she's not our problem by Christmas. I felt the air vanish from the car. She laughed after, he added, like it was a joke. But Grandpa didn't laugh. He just nodded. I reached over, placed my hand gently over his. Do you remember exactly what was said? He nodded. Would you be willing to write it down? Just what you remember, nothing more. He hesitated, then looked up at me with the kind of resolve only kids have, when they know right from wrong, with no gray in between. Yeah, he whispered. I will. He scribbled it all down in the back seat. I didn't coach him. I didn't guide a single word. When he was done, he folded the paper and handed it to me like it was a secret the whole world had forgotten to care about. Are you going to be okay? He asked. I smiled, even though my throat burned. I will be now. I drove him home and watched from the car as he walked up the driveway, my driveway, and turned around one last time to wave. It was small, but in that wave, I felt everything. I wasn't alone anymore. Let them call me paranoid. Let them accuse me of envy. I had something they couldn't manipulate, a child who saw them. And now, with his words, we had something stronger than suspicion. We had intent, which meant next time we stepped into that courtroom, I wouldn't be just a woman trying to reclaim her name. I'd be a witness to how deep the betrayal really ran. And so would he. Next up, we weren't filing paperwork anymore. We were taking the stand. Court didn't feel like justice. It felt like grief in a suit. I sat in the small, cold room next to my lawyer, paperwork stacked in neat little piles between us, like proof alone could fix what betrayal broke. But when the clerk called our case and we stepped into that courtroom, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just a fight for assets anymore. It was a fight to reclaim the version of me they tried to erase. Across the aisle, he sat next to Pauline. She looked pristine, white blouse, minimal jewelry, expression just barely sympathetic. He didn't meet my eyes once. The judge entered. The court came to order. My lawyer opened with the recordings. Pauline's voice whispering about documents. My husband laughing about spinning stories, convincing me to sign things I never read. Then came the forged deed, the trust, the fake doctor, my financial records, the destroyed credit score. Every receipt felt like a shovel in dirt they thought no one would ever dig through. But when the judge asked if we had any first-hand witness testimony, I reached for the folded paper in my purse. My grandson, I said calmly. He overheard something. The judge raised an eyebrow. From whom? From both defendants, my lawyer answered. He was in the kitchen. He heard them discussing the trust and, we object, Pauline's lawyer snapped, standing suddenly. Children's hearsay. Overruled, the judge said, not even blinking. It will be reviewed. I handed over the note. The judge read it silently. When he looked up, he didn't speak. He just nodded and asked for the next document. An hour later, the hearing ended. Outside the courtroom, I sat on the bench like my bones had turned to cement. I expected rage, or at least fear. But when my husband finally walked past, all I felt was nothing. He paused, like he wanted to say something. I turned my head just slightly. I didn't look at him, just let the silence hang between us like a verdict of its own. That night, my lawyer called me. You're not going to believe this, he said. They want to settle. I blinked. Settle? Privately, out of court. No media, no public record. I could hear the change in his voice. There was a difference between panic and regret. And this was pure panic. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, because part of me wanted to say yes, take the money, restore my name, move on. But another part, the one they tried to smother with spa brochures and paranoia, wanted the truth seen. "They're scared of something," I said finally. "More than the trust, more than the house." "I think so too," he said. "And if we go to trial, we get discovery access." I closed my eyes, breathed in slowly. "Then we go all the way," I said. "We take it to court." There was a pause, then a quiet, satisfied reply. "Good, because I've seen people like them before, and they always hide the worst things in the details." I hung up, staring out at the darkness beyond the window. Whatever they were hiding, whatever truth they buried behind forged names and sweet-smelling manipulation, I was going to find it. And next, I'd say it out loud, in front of a judge, in front of everyone. I hadn't stepped into a courtroom in 20 years, not since jury duty. This time, I wasn't in the audience. I wasn't there to observe. I was the one who'd be sworn in, the one whose voice had been dismissed, doubted, and discarded, finally asked to speak. I wore navy, not black. I wasn't mourning anymore. The courthouse was packed tighter than I expected, not from the public, but from people who used to call me family. Some of them sat behind him. A few even waved when I walked in. I didn't wave back. The clerk called my name. I stood, walked slowly, deliberately. Every step was heavier than it looked, but none of them were backward. I raised my right hand, swore the oath, sat down, and then, finally, after everything they'd taken, everything they'd twisted, I spoke. "My name is Mary Ann," I began, "and I was married for 37 years. I glanced at my husband. He looked away. I was a business owner, a mother, a partner. I thought I was loved." I paused. I was wrong. I told the court about the forged documents, the credit accounts I never opened, the fake doctor, the trust built on a lie. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I let the facts bleed on their own. When my lawyer handed me the recordings, I played them one by one. First, my husband laughing about how I'd sign anything. Then, Pauline's voice, "She won't know. She doesn't ask questions." The courtroom didn't gasp. It went silent. Then came the moment I'd waited for. I reached into my bag and pulled out the card. That stupid, humiliating card he gave me at our anniversary dinner after handing her a $20,000 necklace. I held it up, showed the court, a simple white envelope. No name. Inside, one word, in his handwriting. "Thanks." I read it aloud, clearly. You could feel the air change, a sharp inhale from someone in the back row. The judge leaned forward just slightly. Then I looked straight at my husband. 37 years, I said, and that was all I was worth to you. He didn't speak. His eyes darted to the floor, and then tears, not mine, his, not for what he did, but for what was happening to him. The court clerk asked if I needed a break. I shook my head. "No, I'm not finished." I spoke about the eviction. The locks changed. The notice taped to the front door like a slap in the face. I described my grandson's note, his innocent voice repeating what he'd overheard. "You'll be gone by Christmas." And I ended with this. I used to think being quiet meant being kind, that if I waited long enough, things would fix themselves. But silence isn't peace. It's a prison. And I finally broke out. I stepped down to silence. Not the cold kind, the stunned kind. Outside the courtroom, my hands trembled. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. I'd just laid it all bare. Now it was their turn. Because next, it wouldn't be me answering questions. It would be her, Pauline. And the thing about people like her, they crumble when the mask slips. And I was about to watch it fall, piece by piece in front of everyone. The bailiff called her name. Pauline rose from the bench slowly, like she thought she was walking into an audition, not a cross-examination. She smoothed her blouse, smiled like this was all just a silly misunderstanding, and gave a little nod to the judge before taking her seat. But the courtroom was different now. The charm wasn't working. The walls were closing in, and she knew it. My lawyer didn't waste time. "Let's begin with the spa," he said, flipping a document. "Did you use funds from any account not solely in your name to launch the business?" She tilted her head. "I'm not sure. I'd have to check with my accountant." "You mean the same accountant listed as a co-signer on this line of credit?" he asked, holding up a paper. Her face twitched, just slightly. "I don't recall signing that," she said. He smiled politely. "Of course. Then you also won't recall this wire transfer from Marianne's account, dated 2 days before the grand opening?" He passed it to the judge. Pauline didn't even look at it. That's when he brought out the hotel photos, her and my husband. Dinner. Hand-holding. Entering a hotel lobby just after midnight. "I was just comforting him," she said quickly. Marianne, hadn't been well. He needed support. "Interesting," my lawyer said. "Because according to this document, filed 2 days after that photo was taken, you were granted access to one of Marianne's rental properties via a forged signature." Gasps echoed from the gallery. Pauline's tone snapped from serene to sharp. "I didn't forge anything. If someone gave me documents, I assumed they were legit." "So you admit you accepted a property transfer you knew nothing about?" he asked calmly. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. And that's when he hit the last domino. The email, a recovered message from a deleted account, subpoenaed 2 weeks ago. He handed a printed copy to the judge and read it aloud. "Once she's under, we get the papers signed. Hartley said she'll be out cold, no questions. By the time she comes around, everything will already be in place." Silence. Pin drop silence. The judge looked over his glasses. "Who is Hartley?" Pauline didn't answer. "Answer the question," the judge repeated, voice like iron. "I don't," she stammered. "That's not?" "You sent the email," my lawyer cut in. "You signed the trust. You received the transferred funds. Do you want us to go through the text messages too?" She stood, shaking. "I was trying to help her," she blurted. She didn't know how bad things were. She was spiraling. My husband and I, were just trying to take care of everything. "By taking her name off the deed?" the judge asked coolly. Pauline turned red, then pale, and then, just like that, she snapped. "I did more for that man in 2 years than she did in 37, she screamed, pointing at me. "You mean the man who helped you forge federal documents?" the judge asked. Her mouth opened. Then she turned on her own lawyer. "You told me they wouldn't find that email." Court security moved forward. Her voice rose, wild now. "She was supposed to be out of the picture." Her lawyer tried to hush her, but it was too late. The mask was gone, and the courtroom had seen the real Pauline, vindictive, unhinged, entitled. I watched it all, silent, steady. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to shout, because the fire she lit to burn me down had finally turned on her. And the judge? He wasn't done yet. Next came the sentencing, and the division of everything they tried to steal. There was no noise in the courtroom after Pauline's outburst, just the thick, suffocating quiet of consequences finally catching up. She stood frozen, chest heaving, her words still hanging in the air like ash from a house fire she swore she didn't start. She was supposed to be out of the picture. That was it. The truth. Raw, unfiltered, no more legal deflection, no more false sweetness, just venom, exposed for all to see. The judge didn't bang the gavel. He didn't need to. He looked at her, then at my husband, and said, with measured calm, "We will reconvene for final rulings, but I've seen enough to proceed with preliminary findings." I sat still, my hands clenched in my lap, my pulse thudding in my throat. This was it, not the beginning of the fight. The end. The judge turned to his clerk. Quiet instructions. A flurry of papers handed out. Pauline sat back down, her face blank now. Empty. Whatever plan she'd been clinging to had dissolved in her hands. My husband didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor. I almost pitied him. Almost, because I realized as the judge began listing the court's conclusions, that this wasn't just a case about fraud. It was about rot that had been growing in my marriage for years, while I convinced myself I was just imagining it. But I wasn't. The ruling was clear. My forged signature nullified the property transfers. The deed to my house? Returned to me. The trust built on a falsified medical record? Invalidated. Reversed. The credit lines in my name? Frozen and referred to federal investigation units for further action. And the fraudulent co-signatures on loans? All linked back to both Pauline and my husband. The judge wasn't lenient. He called it what it was: premeditated financial abuse. He awarded me full legal control of our primary residence and rental properties, along with restitution for the destroyed credit and the damages done to my personal finances. Then came the fine, 6 figures, a split penalty, half owed by her, half by him, and the final blow, a permanent no-contact order. My husband, ex-husband, as of that day, was barred from contacting me in any form. No emails, no letters, not even a third-party message through family. I watched him as the judge read it. His face crumpled, but he didn't cry this time. Because he knew there was no begging his way out now. There was no fixing what had been exposed under oath. Pauline's lawyer didn't even try to argue. After her courtroom meltdown, no jury in the world would have taken her side. She was escorted out before the sentencing even finished, shouting about injustice and ungrateful old women. She'd built an empire on my name, my money, my silence. Now it was all gone. I stood outside the courthouse after it was over. Sunlight hit the marble steps, warm and unfamiliar. I didn't know what to feel. Not relief, not joy, something quieter, something cleaner. Peace. I was still standing, and they were not. Have you ever had to choose yourself when no one else did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Whether you've been through something similar or just needed this story today, I'm glad you're here. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and check out the other stories on the channel. If this one moved you, there's more where it came from.